Community is obviously a huge component of any brand, particularly younger brands that are starting out and looking to grow their scale and impact. During the course of COVID, we've seen a lot of interesting ways that brands are stepping up to support their community, and very excited to have Helena Hambrecht here, who is the founder of the drinks brand Haus, to share some of her insights and things that they have been up to. So Helena, welcome, and thanks so much for joining me at Retail Innovation Week.
Thank you for having me. It's good to be here.
Wonderful. So perhaps just as a sort of little bit of background, you can start off by talking about the Haus brand, what you are ultimately trying to accomplish, and where you're at sort of currently.
Sure. Haus is a booze company, which, there's a lot of those, but we set out to build the first digital first booze company that was focused on the drinker as opposed to a distributor or a bartender. It's something that's never happened before in the States. And as we had the idea for this company, it was based on the idea of why isn't there a better way to drink, and a way that really cared about the customer and what they needed, not just from the liquid itself, but the entire customer experience. And we launched about a year and a half ago, and it's been going really well so far, even in 2020.
Excellent. Well, that's great to hear. I think in some ways 2020 was a great time to be in the booze business, as you say. So, I mentioned community at the outset, and I was aware of some of the things that you were doing as a brand to sort of get your community engaged and involved. Maybe you can sort of talk just more generally about the ways that community plays a role in the growth of your brand.
Sure. I mean, we didn't really set out with the idea of like, how do we grow our community? Or, we didn't really think about it like that. We just wanted to make something that people wanted. And we're building something with a set of values that we really believed in, like better quality, authenticity, transparency, like, all of these things that we wanted in a brand. And we knew that people we knew wanted that. And some research implied that a lot of people might want this. And we just wanted to lead with our values, like we were building this for a legitimate reason to solve problems that we had. And we just had a feeling that it would attract people who shared those values. And I think because we've led with it so much from the very beginning, like we don't even talk about what Haus is that much. We talk about why we exist and the problems that we solve, and how we're changing the industry. And those are the things that keep attracting customers. And that seems to be a really organic foundation that you really need to build the community the right way from the start. And it doesn't even stop at community, right? It bleeds into our employees and who we hire. And it's a good way to attract the people that you want to attract.
I like that idea of why as opposed to what. I think that just that like little transition makes like a huge difference just in how you kind of like approach and communicate. Just sort of following up on that a little bit is, I think, I have been in the past when everyone was able to be in one space, some of these, sort of gatherings that you as a brand have had, and then also, now we've shifted to this sort of remote context, and I wonder if you can talk about some of the sort of things that you found to be very effective just in terms of, engaging that community and continuing that conversation.
Oh yeah. I mean, isn't it wild that, we used to have parties and events, and that stopped about a year ago. 2020 really forced us to kind of sit back and listen, right? Which I think is an underrated part of community building, like, or even company building, right? Like you've got to pay attention to what's going on with your customers. And 2020 was quite a going on, right? Like everybody was stopped in their tracks, like there's economic changes, there's behavioral changes, everybody's feeling horrible. And The first thing that we did when COVID hit, other than shutting down our offices and not having parties anymore, was to really listen. And part of that was having actual dialogues with our customers. We have a strategy team that talks to customers all the time, but also just paying attention to the world and how are people spending their time now, like what is going to help them versus be a distraction, like how are they connecting with friends, like how are they creating rituals in their home that they're stuck in 24/7, like really observing and figuring out how can we just insert ourselves into what's actually happening and be helpful versus like try to force something on somebody when they don't want it. And that worked really well for us. I think we've gotten a lot of praise for just how we've carried the brand over the last year. And I think a big part of that is like we didn't want to force anything on anybody. We really wanted to pay attention to how people were living now. And if we fit into that, great. And if we don't, it's okay.
So early on in the pandemic, obviously many restaurants were struggling, and you created the restaurant project, which was something that really stood out to us for many reasons. I think one was the fact that how quickly it kind of came to market, and how vital and important it was. So if you could just take a minute and talk a little bit about the inspiration behind that initiative, and then how practically that became a reality so quickly.
Sure. Yeah, for those of you who don't know, the Restaurant Project was a line of 13 aperitifs that we launched with 13 different restaurants across the country when the pandemic was really hitting. And we would make booze for them, we'd sell booze for them. They co-created the recipes with us and we'd give them all of the profit. We ended up giving about 200 grand to these restaurants. Um, and, you know, that's not necessarily a good for business move to go launch 13 products and give all the money away. But at that point, we were a couple of months into the pandemic and we noticed that, e-commerce was up, alcohol was up, our business was up in general. And we kind of had this basic security of like, okay, we're not going to go out of business. So what can we do to help others in our industry, right? Like we work in food and beverage, restaurants are a big part of that. And they were all in danger of closing. And we kind of, sat back and looked around and we really wanted to figure out like, what could we do that's unique? Like, what could we do with the tools that we have that could make maybe even more of an impact than just like a donation campaign? And, a lot of people don't know, we make all of our products ourselves. Like my husband and his team literally make the booze. We have a warehouse, we have tanks, we have all this equipment. And so, we saw other companies turning their warehouses into, hand sanitizer factories. And something just kind of clicked where we were like, what if, we ask these restaurants if they want to make a booze with us, if they want to make an aperitif, they co-create the recipes with us, so they feel some ownership over it and they're really proud of the product. That's important to them. And then we can make it, we can sell it, and we can just give them all the profit. And it's again, it's like not a super practical idea. And Woody definitely was exhausted doing like 20-hour days for 2 months making this happen. But I think more than anything, it just felt like the right thing to do. And it's kind of just good karma. And I think it was also a way, again, to really show people that our values are legit, because there's a lot of brands out, like values led brands. It's kind of like a baseline now. And so there's a lot of talk, but the differentiator now isn't saying, that you're values driven. It's like actually living it. And so it really was our opportunity to just show that, we're not really a business that's maniacally focused on growth and money. And, like, of course we want to grow big because we want to make an impact, but we also want to do good things like constantly along the way. So, that's really why it happened.
What have you seen from consumers in terms of their response to the initiative? I mean, obviously you can probably, you know, sort of see that in sales, but have you heard directly from consumers as well?
Oh yeah, no, they thought it was the coolest thing like they'd ever seen. I mean, it was it was so fun for us, even just from an alcohol innovation standpoint, to make that many flavors with like ingredients chosen by these James Beard Michelin chefs, stuff that hadn't been used in booze before. And, this approach of like, what would this restaurant taste like in booze form? Like, it was so fun to push even those boundaries from a product perspective. And people loved that alone. And I think it just helped people get a better idea that there are real people behind the brand. It's not just some shiny, pretty thing that's like secretly made by a corporation. Like, it's actually people who give a shit and who want to take care of their friends, in the space. And yeah, I mean, we've never stopped hearing about it.
Amazing. And obviously what's so exciting about it is the fact that it's so, aligned with what it is that you're doing. You're just sort of like approaching it from a slightly different standpoint. But I wonder, are there things that you have been able to take away from that project and sort of put into the sort of initiatives that you're, moving forward with as a brand as well?
Oh yeah. I mean, we acquired a ton of customers from it, right? Like, it caught so many people's eyes, people that maybe had been looking at our brand but hadn't pulled the trigger yet, or even people who loved those restaurants and saw the chefs promote it. We grew our community with people that really love food and beverage. So, and those are such valuable customers for product development. So we've been able to continue dialogues. Like, they've had such an impact on how we inform our own production process and the flavors that we choose and what the product ends up tasting like. And we also just learned how much we can do, right? Like, we learned our own limits. Like, launching 13 products in 2 months is it's insane. And we just learned what we were capable of, and we learned kind of where the holes were in our process that we could fix before Q4, which ended up being, the most insane quarter we've ever had. So, I think a lot of people feel the tendency to want to tie an immediate return, or really quantify the impact of something right up front, like how much revenue will this bring in right now, or like, they want to be able to quantify the impact immediately. And for us, a lot of the decisions that we've made have been long game, like investing so much in our brand up front and the packaging, the customer experience, and building relationships with reporters in hopes that they'll write about us 2 years later. Like, a lot of the decisions that we've made don't have an immediate return, but we kind of have to just trust in the system and know that these are the kind of things that really matter to people, and it will come back around. And so far it has.
That's amazing. Yeah, it's so true. Like one of the things that you hear about just sort of like, you know, the startup space is this whole like venture backed push for just like growth at all costs and no sort of long view on sustainability and what it actually means to kind of like, build a brand and grow a community over time. And so I think that's like to be able to have that insight, obviously beyond just brand purpose and all the things that you're doing as a young brand right now, and thinking about what's worked, what hasn't. We have folks in the audience that are from new brands, from established brands, retailers, etc. And I wonder if you can just kind of close out with some thoughts on what you're seeing happening in the marketplace, and what are some best practices that folks need to be thinking of as they look at 2021 and beyond.
There's a big shift happening, from retail to e-com right now, just because we have no choice, right? There's a lot of folks who are starting to build out the e-com side of things. But even without that, I think there's a change that's happened in food and beverage where, originally, everybody got their products from retail, and so the experience was kind of the same across all products. And you just hoped that the Whole Foods of the world or the Targets of the world were giving the customers a really great experience, and that's why you were working with them. But now it's kind of becoming the Wild West, and people are buying more of their products online, or they're buying direct from the producer. And something that we really believed from the beginning is, our booze had to be good. Like, it's still the number one reason people come back to Haus and buy is because it tastes good. You can't cut corners there, but it's not enough anymore. Like, we had to really think holistically about what's important to today's customer, not just the ingredients and the quality and the values there, but also like Amazon has, created the expectancy that you should be getting your packages in 2 days for free. So you can't be shipping, 5 weeks out anymore, and you can't be charging $50 for ground shipping or whatever it is. You have to bring, the customer experience, from the packaging. It has to be beautiful. There should be education or like gorgeous materials inside that really teach people about the product and why it exists. There's all these different pieces that really have to serve the customer. I think it's so important to listen to your customers and even just pay attention to what the new generations of buyers care about in the customer experience. And it's not just the product itself, right? Like, it's not just the juice in the bottle at our company that brings people back. It's like the care that you put into packaging and how it looks in someone's home. It's the unboxing experience. Make it so beautiful that they just have to take a picture and share it, like attach educational materials so that not only do they know how to use it, but they know who's behind it, or they know the story, and they fall in love with the brand and the process. And then, try to have a direct relationship with that customer, whether it's through social or whether it's through email. Like, it's so good to have that dialogue, whether it's for research or interviewing them for editorial or whatever it might be. Like, that whole cycle is really important to today's customer. And I think with people moving to e-commerce now because of COVID, it really is an opportunity to try amending that experience for today's customer and seeing how it impacts your brand long term.
I love that you've sort of, come full circle with that sort of consumer at the center of everything that a brand is doing, and all the various ways that they are show up in that process in many ways. So I think this is fantastic advice. I know it's been a crazy Q4 for you coming out of the holidays, I'm sure. So really appreciate you taking the time to share with us today, and good luck going forward in 2021.
Thank you.